double check to see if it's actually recording. It usually gives me a warning. Yes, now it's recording. I'll share. So what I wanted to talk about first, Elena, you said something about some strange error when testing develop branch. I noticed, and this happens all the time actually, that we have some, or I have when I compile and build, I get this out of date database associated file. We touched upon this before, I think, in that I actually committed this as an updated version to one of the main branches because we thought it might be needed to create an installer which with consistent schema and data change elements. So maybe I should commit this one, which is the latest develop branch, and see if that makes any change for you, Elena.
I think yes, because
Okay.
before we saw um, cases when the problem was in the pack.
Yes. So just so everyone know, the file I'm committing now, it is actually updated during your local builds, and it's used by the installer as it's included in the installer to actually ensure that the installer updates the database against the live database consistently. What I'm a bit unsure of if is that this file is updated as part of the Jenkins build pipe, as it should be. So just know that if you make database changes, then it might be good when you have completed this work to commit this backpack file. You will find it now in this change list. Luckily, we don't frequently make changes in a database, so I don't think this needs to be done frequently. There is one thing though. I think this file also contains local settings. Well, not local settings, but there's some timestamps and things like that that will be updated next time I build. Now I will see it changed again, and these changes are compatible, so I can always push if I want. But in most cases, I know that I haven't made any changes of the database myself. So in that case, I'd often just ignore this local change file. But yes, I mean, now that Elena is pointing out she has a problem, it's a good test for her that I committed now this file that I have locally. Anyway, what I wanted to show you guys what I do to make sure that we maintain a consistent and clean build environment. And one of the things you should use a few minutes on before making permanent changes to the release branch, but also now develop branch, is to make sure that we run the unit tests. So let me just show you how I run the unit tests, and there's a kind of a workaround to some of the problems that you would see also. So now I hope everyone is making active use of Radar. I'm not sure of your status there, Anatoly, but I do encourage you now at least to install Radar and get familiar with it, because I think, or I know that once you get into the system of Radar, you will get improved productivity. I spent a few months actually to get to know Radar well enough to say that I had the same proficiency in Radar as I had in Visual Studio. But once I reached this level, I found that I was adding and improving on my productivity quite a bit. So I do encourage everyone to actually now start opening Radar on a daily basis and make use of it. So yes, unit testing. What I do is that I use this unit test functionality, which is inherent to all Radar installations. We have two main groups of unit tests. The first group is basically testing old code. So there's code in desktop client which are being tested by these unit tests, but also quite a bit of the tests are done against the report engine. And this is actually a bit worrying at the moment because I noticed from several months back that there's quite a few broken tests in this group. So if I run this particular group, I can, by the way, this is to run all the tests. And then this is to run that selected row. So let me just focus on the selected row first. So you will see failing tests here, and I haven't been too busy with fixing here because I think some of these are things we could safely ignore, but still we shouldn't have a policy where we are ignoring broken unit tests basically. So I think before we finish 5.5, I will hand out a few assignments in trying to fix these broken unit tests so that when we have are entering the release phase of our 5.5 project, we make sure that all the unit tests which are currently failing are actually fixed and have been looked at. Of course, a fix could be just removing the unit test because it might be obsolete. It could be updating the criteria because the criteria has changed, but it could also be actually finding a problem in the current implementation and fixing that problem, of course. Now, you can see that I have failed unit tests. What I usually do then to get a better overview and focus is to apply this filter to failed unit tests. The list is now smaller, and then often I would expand everything. And if I click on the row here on the left side, you can see that on the right side, there's a message about what assertion, often there's an assertion that is failing. It could also be a crash due to a crash, in which case the call stack would be visible. But here you can see actually there's a failure in this unit test. If I double click on it, it will also bring up the source code. You can also skip down with this button, and you can see the control sequence there. So you can see here a typical example. We have a new field probably on the assignment level, which aren't recognized for this test. Anyway, I won't bore with this test for now anymore. Just know that I will be given some assignments to fix this at the end of our release phase. What is actually more interesting are everything that goes into the X unit tests. Basically, these should never fail. And let me just run them for now and show you. Currently, there's a known problem in that some of the tests are not properly isolated. They're basically manipulating global data, and this manipulation is causing some conflicts in unit test runtimes, because now it's actually running things consecutively, but depending on the order you're running tests in, you will get some different results. So this is something I myself would take charge of on fixing. But for now, what you could do to make sure that you haven't broken anything inadvertently yourself is to run the set of tests in this bundle twice. I will show you what I mean. It takes approximately a minute and a half, maybe 2 minutes to run through the entire set of tests. So it shouldn't take you too much time to do this on a daily basis. At least you should do it before you commit changes into a develop branch. You can see now I have 6 broken tests. Now, if I rerun these broken tests one more time, what should happen is that you see everything is okay after the second run. And again, I want to highlight this is not the expected behavior. It should pass the first time around. But for now, I haven't taken this necessary time to locate and isolate and fix these isolation issues. But you can see now, this is what you should see in that when you pass the second run, no unit test is failing. So what I detected this morning after getting the latest develop branch into my own feature branch was that there were a few broken unit tests, and I can show you what I did to fix it. So basically, we had added a new field to this class, which is the field object.cs file and class. You would see the previous pattern is that we have prefixed the properties here with ignore data member or data member. And this is actually required for serialization of this particular class. So the fix was after I detected this problem during running of the unit tests, was to make sure that I added a prefix of data member with a unique key. This might look strange if you're not familiar with the message pack. So just to give some context to this, I'm using message pack. If I go to the definition of this, you will see that it's in the message pack DLL. And message pack is a third-party library that I make use of to convert text data to binary data before submitting it to be passed to the web client. So it's basically like a performance optimization or size optimization of data that we want to pass between the server and the client. And in this case, this class is part of the metadata, the field data that needs to be transmitted to the web client. And as such, it's quite a big data set. So I found that this is a good place to make use of this extra overhead in that we're converting it from ASCII to binary before converting. And of course, you would see on the receiving end, there's a function to unpack the binary to JavaScript data. But yeah, just so that you get some context to why the key is here. And it needs to be unique for all the data members that are part of this API. If you don't care about transmitting the data to the web client, then you can always use the ignore data member. But one of these two options are required when you make changes in this and some other classes as well. So if you are wondering if you need to add these prefixes or not, what you could do is just to run the unit tests after making some API changes. And if the test failing, then more than likely you have overlooked the fact that you need to be added. The other issue I found after this data merge of feature branch into develop branch was that then nswag generated files were not updated. I think I've talked about this before quite briefly, but these two data files or source files, TypeScript files, are actually if I view that on the header, they are automatically generated by the nswag tool chain. So basically, these are C# code elements. It can be an interface, it could be a class, or it could be an enum, and these are needs to be one-to-one. So these are part of the data exchange between the web client and the server. And if they're not one-to-one, then you would inevitably run into some problems. And these problems will be more than likely hard to debug and hard to trace down. So to make sure that we get one-to-one relationship between what the server is expecting as far as the data format and what the web client is actually sending to the server or receiving from the server, we have this auto generation by nswag. So you would see that if I look to the difference now, which the right one is the one that I ran nswag toolchain and saved as a resulting chain. you will see that what was lacking and missed was that you needed to actually add this row in two different places. So entity objects is making use of this as a property on the server side, and it now needs to be also in a similar place in a TypeScript file. There's also similar changes in a few places in this other generated file. Now, having introduced these changes to this file, you would also see that it broke the compilation of TypeScript unless you actually added this row, which now is missing and needed. And I wanted to show you, well, how do I run the nswag toolchain? It's very easy, actually. If you open a command line, and I do recommend that you use a git bash, which I do now, then you will be able to repeat what I'm doing now. I just say Jenkins build .hsh. If you run this command, sorry, should write it fully, you will see that it starts compilation of the desktop client. It compiles the backend. It runs the nswag tool chain. Then it starts compiling the Angular application. So everything is taken care of here for you. It also makes sure that the file, the DACpack file, is also updated and generated. So let's just let this pass through. It doesn't take too long on my PC. So I'm lucky in that I have a pretty powerful PC to run. We can see it's already finished with the C# compilation and it's running the nswag element, which needs to be done after C# has compiled.
Per, can
Yes.
I ask you a question?
Yes, go ahead.
How often do we need to generate these, let's say, classes? Like, is it a kind of build process routine, or what is the trigger that when we need to run this script?
It's a good question. If you look to this file that I now opened, it's stored in the Jenkins folder. There's two files actually. If you make changes to any of these listed classes, you want to make sure that you run the nswag toolchain. And you can see there's quite a bit of classes being referenced here. So I would think that if you're making class changes, which you know are related to data exchanged between the server and the web client, then you most certainly would want to run the nswag toolchain. But if you're actually making like a bug fix and not changing the class properties or things like that, or establishing a new web service, then you more than likely don't need to. And of course, your final safety net is that I do this on a regular basis. And if I detect such an inconsistency, I will, of course, be pushing that change into develop for you. But hopefully, you can see how easy it is to run. You just run this single bash script, and it will actually generate the nswag files for you. So if I go back to the commits now and refresh, nothing has changed because everything is up to date. But if it was such that I had made an API change, you would see now on the default change list, a new version of the Aldrega core, for instance, would be listed.
Is it so that this script built the Angular client?
Yes,
so
it builds.
We can use it on, let's say, regular.
Yes. In fact, it builds everything for you. So it means that you're using this build script. Make sure that everything is consistent. And if it fails the C# build, I think it should abort and not start other elements as well. I think I put in place such a check that it should abort if one of the steps fails.
Yeah, it's a
So
good point because currently what I've done, I manually built, let's say, backend and then manually built Angular client. So if we have script like that, it will be really useful. Thank you.
yeah, and you don't need to do anything other than run it, because obviously you already have a running or locally configured file for I mean, you have made these changes yourself, right? So having done that, you don't need to repeat change of these. You just run the script, and it will then use what you have already set up for you as local environment.
Sounds great. We'll
Yeah.
try it. Okay.
Good. So I think that's enough details for today. Anatoly, I'd like to have a session with you once it's convenient with you, because you now want to revert back to the resource tables in the web client, and I have made substantial changes and updates to the API, which I think you should be aware of and make use of. So Anatoly, let me stop recording now. By the way, let's stop recording. Where did I do that? Second, guys. Teams isn't always intuitive here. Recording and stop recording. There we go.